All right, welcome back to the Green Rush. Again, we are live here every Friday from 4 to 6 Eastern, talking about everything that is the business of cannabis. This week, we're talking about cannabis media. Just had a really cool segment about Puerto Rico international well, not really international, but pretty much.
Yeah.
You have to watch that segment if you didn't already. Cool stuff though with Joe living down in Puerto Rico, but really covering Connecticut, a place I have absolutely no idea about. So yeah, hopefully you guys are going to be covering that on We Talk News, maybe a little segment that we have here coming up at the end of this show, where we have people from all over the country talking about their own local markets. Really quick, really interactive, really informative. Maybe you can tell us a little bit about what's going on in Connecticut, Joe.
Well, as you know, 2021, we legalized cannabis here in Connecticut. It officially took hold the beginning of this year, January of this year. It was a long battle. It took about 7 years before they finally got a bill that they could bring to the floor and pass. So the way the system they set it up was through a lottery. And what they did was they would give people lottery. You could buy basically a lottery ticket. But what they did was they opened it up so you could buy unlimited tickets. So what ended up, the whole process is very complicated. They came up with a very funky licensing structure. They were, giving out social equity licenses, but you had to pay for them. And MSOs could invest in people as long as they were a social equity applicant. And the qualifications for being a social equity applicant were based on geographics, not on, actual people who had been affected by the war on drugs. So the way they set up the regulatory system was very easy to game. Let's put it that way. And I don't know if you know about Connecticut's medical marijuana system, but it's basically been controlled by 4 MSOs for the last few years. Didn't start out that way, but over the last, I would say 4 or 5 years, Connecticut has been completely taken over by MSOs. And I'm talking the growers own the dispensaries as well. So it's been a pretty closed market for a while. And the way the legislator set it up was they gave those same medical growers the first rights to get into the adult use industry. So what we have now is all the existing medical dispensaries are now, mostly all of them, not all of them have converted yet, are now doing both. The same 4 growers are now supplying for the adult use market and the medical market. The products are nearly identical, and we're finding shortages now. We're finding shortages because these guys said that they could keep up with the demand, and they haven't been able to. They just haven't been able to keep up with the demand. So a lot of the new licensees, of which Lou is one, will start to come online, hopefully by the end of the summer, and we'll see a little bit more of an open market down here. But what happened in Connecticut after the first year and after the first round of licensing went through, and we saw all the problems that it had, they came to light very quickly. The fact that people were buying 2,000 lottery tickets because they were part of an MSO and they could afford them. Each ticket was $500. So the small entrepreneur who just wants to throw his $500 in there and see if he can get a license has no shot at all because, these people were just kind of rigging it. So what happened this session, which is the first session after legalization, right? Legislative session. Over 30 bills came through related to cannabis. 30 came through that were all had to be looked at by the legislator. Some very important bills Some of them were just really bills, people just trying to get their 2 cents in. You know, some of them didn't make any sense at all. A lot of them fell by the wayside. But a few stood out, and a few have made it to the final process. One of which being full expungement for anybody who's been convicted of a cannabis conviction, not just a small possession, which was what the original expungement law was. It also to allow the hemp growers to get into the adult use cannabis industry, because they were shut out before. So that's a big bill that's being passed. They're also trying to change the requirements for CBD,
Hey Joe,
which
before you get in, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but before you get into the changes on that CBD, I'm curious with the 30 bills, why so many? Because that's abnormal. Is there an influx in the need for cash? Like, do they like, oh my God, we need some money. Like, let's just
no,
take
they were all mostly about to change the regulatory system, about changing the regulatory system. There were some good ones. There were some that wanted to limit the amount of lottery tickets to one, because they saw that. They wanted to put that actually in the legislature. A lot of it was there, you know, we still have the bipartisan battle here. A lot of the bills were put in by Republicans to try and actually stop the program dead in its tracks. So I would say at least 10 of those bills were put in by Republicans, basically as an FU, because they were pretty much kept out of the process of legalization, because we have such a heavy Democratic majority here that once the Democratic Party gets behind something, they just push it through. And so the Republicans had no say. So this was their ability to get a say. Again, most of those bills fell by the wayside. So I think they're down to probably, out of the 30, I would say 5 to 7 have made it this far down, because, you know, we're getting to the end of the session now. So they did pare it down quite a bit, because some of them are redundant. Some of them were just legislators just trying to get their 2 cents in. An interesting bill that went through was the deregulation, was the decriminalization of, that hasn't gone through yet, but it has made it to the final process, is the psilocybin bill. Connecticut has also been toying with psilocybin. So that's the latest frontier that we're embarking on. But I think it's important that we get our adult use program down and get a fair and equitable licensing system. We were able to get home grow in our bill, which was a huge fight. A huge fight. They did
the
not want
felony
to.
in Washington to grow without an
That's
MMJ
right.
card.
That's
It's crazy.
right. Yeah.
What's the market gonna look like once this all works out? Because I gotta be honest with you, when I think of Connecticut, the location and the size, I place it in a suburb in Chicago. Nothing against anyone from Connecticut, but that's just like what I think of. It's not like anywhere close to New York. Um,
Well, here's
so
Connecticut's.
is there a room for it to grow? I mean, can there be a true industry there? Is it big enough?
If Okay, Connecticut, first of all, is a very corporately leaning state. Okay, we have a lot of big pharma here. Okay, we have a lot of insurance companies here. And again, I see Connecticut, and they lean towards corporations. This is why our industry is so corporate. You know, this is why corporate cannabis and MSOs have pretty much dominated this industry, and probably will continue to dominate it. If Connecticut can get a robust craft cannabis industry going, okay, because one thing that they're very high on here is the craft beer industry. They give them a lot of a lot of leeway. There was no craft beer industry here 10 years ago. Now it's a thriving industry. If they could get it to be a more craft cannabis industry, because you're right, it kind of falls into that small town feel. So where crafty type of small industries, they actually do well here. People will support local businesses that they know are homegrown in Connecticut. Like I said, the craft brewery industry is huge. You got that Pepe's Pizza. If you could get a legacy like that started here in Connecticut, I think the industry will be a lot better off. But Connecticut has an identity crisis, okay? Because you mentioned before, they're not as big as New York. They've always been seen as the little bastard stepchild of New York, right? Or Boston, right? So you got half the state that considers themselves like tri-state people who live on the lower half of the state. But you go to the upper half of the state, and they're more like Massachusetts, Boston people. So half the state loves the Yankees, the other half loves the Red Sox. So we have a definite identity crisis here as well. And there is a definite difference in income levels between the upper half of the state and the lower half of the state. So I think the best way, unless Connecticut embraces a craft cannabis model, like say Vermont has, like say Maine has, they're going to be doomed to a corporately
I've said the
dominated.
same thing about everybody because the markets, when they go medical to rec, get
Yep.
destroyed. It's nothing but trash.
Yep.
And then that whole market has to deteriorate and plummet for any kind of
For it to come
connoisseur
back.
market to come. Yeah.
Yep.
And
Yep.
if you could start that way, you'd be the first one in the country,
To
if not
do
the
it.
world, to do it that way. And that's the only way it works.
Do it right the first time.
Well,
Yeah.
the good thing about Connecticut is they do have a craft cannabis grower license. So, and it's cheap. It's $2,500. The thing is, they didn't give out enough of them. And of course, the way they did it, people who don't even live in Connecticut were able to get licenses as long as they had a partner who lived in Connecticut.
Mm-hmm.
So, we'll see. I have some hope for, like I said, Lou got a license. Okay. And there are some other people who are activists, who know how to grow real good cannabis, who aren't corporately minded. I have some hope that they're going to put out some good product. I really do. And I have some hope for some of these new one-off dispensaries that are owned by community type people. But overall, as a whole, I think that's the only way the industry is going to survive, if you allow Connecticut people to actually get in and do it. And
What about advertising? Because that's one way of getting the word out there. So you've been doing Cannabis Corner for half a decade. I'm curious how you're able to generate revenue. Can you advertise? And Connecticut, will they be able to advertise? Because you can't do that here in Washington. Like one day you can do it on billboards, the next day you can't. So what's the whole advertising scene with what you're doing and what you're seeing?
Cannabis, Connecticut is very restrictive on advertising. You can't have a billboard. You can't do radio ads. Can't do newspaper ads. You can't do print ads. You can't buy banners on other websites. The only place you can advertise is on your own website or on your own app. You're not even allowed to do social media marketing. Some of the medical people have gotten around it. They kind of loosened the laws for medical, but they tightened it up for the adult use market. So that does not apply to ancillary businesses. So if you are a cannabis, let's say a cannabis educational, a school, you can advertise. Let's say you are a medical marijuana doctor, you can advertise. But as far as the dispensaries and the growers, they are allowed to sponsor events. That's about as much as they get. and
It
they
sounds like the
can't
same in New
sponsor
Jersey.
any events that have alcohol in the same place. So it's very, very restrictive advertising laws here.
Yeah, like we can actually get Curaleaf as a sponsor. Like all the sports leagues let us put up a sign that says Curaleaf if we want now, because they'll give us like a couple $100. And but yeah, it's like it's the oddest thing because we have the Curaleaf in town, so they let us advertise, but you can't advertise anywhere else. So, but
No,
they're allowed to sponsor sports teams for kids. It's so bizarre.
isn't
Does
that's
that make any
weird?
sense to anyone?
Yeah. No, it
Wrap
doesn't.
up this segment for us, Joe. Tell us about what some of those bills are changing. I cut you off. You were going to be talking about
Oh,
this
okay.
CBD changing bill. Tell us
Yeah,
what's going to be happening in the industry up there.
they have a bill in, and I don't know the exact specs of it, but basically what it'll do is change the requirements for full spectrum CBD and basically destroy the hemp industry here. And the second thing that they want to do is they want to get CBD allowed to be sold in dispensaries. That's another bill that's coming through. But again, because of the new regulations that they're trying to put in, it would preclude any CBD pretty much made in the state. So again, you're handing it right over to the MSOs. So in conclusion, what I see happening with a lot of these bills, they're trying to get a caregiver program put in, but the wording in the bill is just so restrictive that hardly anybody could become a caregiver. My thing is, I think what I see happening in Connecticut is exactly what you mentioned before. The medical industry is in a shambles right now. And I think Connecticut is taking its focus off the medical industry. We legalized hemp in Connecticut, and now they're putting in all kinds of laws that would pretty much decimate the hemp industry. So I'm just wondering if this is done by design in order to put all the focus on the adult use, because that's
where
where
they're
the
getting their tax
state,
money, right? Follow that
right?
money trail, you'll get that answer.
That's where the state is making the most
That's it.
money.
There's your
And
answer.
it's very disturbing to me because the
Yeah.
state promised that the medical program would stay intact,
Mhm.
and it hasn't. It's suffered. The patients are suffering. The quality of medicine has gone way down. The supply is basically almost cut in half because the adult use market is being supplied by the same people.
Mhm.
And and that's
It's
what I see here in Connecticut.
it's getting gross. Like 2 years in a row, I've bought an ounce around 420, and last year I bought 8 ounces because I went to 20 stores on 420, and I stopped doing that after 6 years in a row.
Right.
And a couple of those ounces had spider mites. One of them had mold. This year, the 1 ounce I buy per week happened to have a spider mite in it. Like you could see it visibly, the nest. And I'm like, damn, people. Okay, so note to self and
Yeah.
anybody who's listening: don't buy anything. You know, when you go to a gas station and the truck, the tanker is unloading, and you're not supposed to get gas because they're bringing up the sediment from the bottom, and you got to wait for it
Right.
to settle. Same thing with this. Don't buy any cannabis from any store the week before, during, or after 420. I'm stocking up before, and for 3 weeks, I'm not doing it. That's disgusting.
Yeah, no, and quality control is definitely lacking, especially with the MSOs. They're constantly getting cited, they're constantly getting fines. They're constantly getting caught selling moldy products and
The
everything.
Curaleaf in New Jersey, it's right around the corner from me. I say it almost every week on here. They've been nailed over a dozen times by the state. The state
Yeah,
doesn't have a regulation in place that says that they have to do anything. All the state has to do is say, correct it, and Curaleaf has to say, okay, and then they come back the next time. Every single time they come
right.
back, they get hit with the same damn thing. It's amazing. Amazing. And then they just actually closed that grow facility because they had the union problem.
Yeah, I saw that. I
And then they
saw
pulled
that.
their license, which I said literally 3 days before that they were going to lose their license, and boom, 2 days later it happens. And then magically on the Monday, that like 2 days later, magically the CRC reinstates their license because
Yeah,
they got a lot of political backlash for that one.
yeah,
And
yeah.
that was that. They said, we'll pull our political money or you'll reinstate that license real quick. And That's how that probably went down.
I'm
And
about to
that's what I
fire.
learned about when I was working on the legalization campaign, how deep their pockets go and how much they are willing to spend
Mm.
on lobbyists
Mhm.
that the industry, that the activists don't have. And how much money talks, especially to the legislators, you know, and it kind of, it saddens me because, like you say, it happened in New York, it happened in Jersey, it happened in Connecticut. They end up getting the control of the industry, you know, because they have the money and they help write the laws.
The
And they write
influence
them
is
terribly.
unreal. The 20,000% return on investment that a lobbyist can get
Yeah.
is unmatched by any vote you could ever imagine. And yet we're not going to see much change until the system collapses in on itself because nobody
Yeah.
wants that trash. So unfortunately, we're going to have to live through it. I don't think your market in Connecticut is going to be any different than what I've seen in the last
Nope.
10 years in Washington. New Jersey, and everywhere else is going to Massachusetts. They all go through the same system,
I think
unfortunately.
Massachusetts is starting right now.
Yeah, it's frustrating watching it happen, but my hope is that at the end of that, the phoenix will rise, and that's the connoisseurs,
Yeah.
and they'll
California's another one. California's, and
yeah,
you would
Getting
think that would be
smashed.
the #1 industry in the country, right? That's like where it all started. And look at their industry; it's in a shambles. Shambles.
yeah. Well, yeah, it's obviously driving out but the infrastructure is there, kind of like we mentioned in the last segment with
Yep.
Puerto Rico. The infrastructure is being built by these terrible MSOs that won't live very much longer. And then connoisseurs will rise.
Yeah.
And then we'll have to talk about
Can't
that on
wait.
the podcast. But I think with that, we're going to have to roll this one up. So definitely want to thank our guest, Joe LaChance of Cannabis Corner, talking all about Connecticut from the Caribbean. Appreciate you being on with us live here at Green Rush. Appreciate all your insights and everything. We'll have to have you back on.
Absolutely. And I hope to see you guys down here soon. Thank you.
Yeah, dude, I'm going to take you up on that for sure. So
you got my
For
contact.
sure, we're taking you up.
Yeah,
Yeah.
man. Come on. I love having visitors. I love it.
All right. Well, Doug, me, Josh, I'm out of here. There's going to be another segment, so don't go anywhere. Come back next Friday, 4 to 6 Eastern. We're always here talking about something random, always about cannabis, though. But until then, talk to you guys later.
Take care.
Don't forget to smash that like button on your way out and check out these other videos that we've got.